What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and in today's video, we're going to go through the LPL. So, a lot of these player rankings and the futures that we're going to look at, I think, might be a little surprising for a couple of different reasons. So, with the player rankings, I think that I'm going to be lower on a lot of players than you are, and I think that I'll be higher on a lot of players than you are, which I think will identify a lot of good spots in the futures. The one thing I will say about the LPL is that there are a lot of very good players, and in some spots it's different. It's difficult to differentiate between the very good and the very bad, and like what does league average mean. So, with that being said, we should probably go into the disclaimer. So, we're going to use this disclaimer, I think, pretty often this year, but here we go. Disclaimer: yes, all of these players are better than me at League of Legends, and honestly, they're probably better than almost all of the other professionals that are out there. Like, you will find really good players in other parts of the world, but in the next video or the one after that, we're gonna go through like every player ranking kind of thing. I think I want to do that, and you'll see that a lot of these players are higher up. Maybe some of that's biased, but it's just how I see things. My goal is to provide information that makes people make smarter decisions, specifically with betting. So if you have a disagreement with me about how I rank players, you may want to reconsider and think, oh, maybe that's why he has an edge in betting, or maybe like his contrarian viewpoint on that player can help get some value for him in some of these lines. That's how you have to think about these things. You might not, but that's how you're supposed to, and you should. And I do mean that in like a should way. It doesn't mean that you need to necessarily agree with the specific players that I have different takes on, but you need to have different takes on players and teams to identify some of that value. This means that almost all the language that I'm going to use will be relative. So it's good professionals compared to bad professionals. Specifically in this video, it's good Chinese players compared to, well, good players that play in China versus okay players that play in China, or bad players that play in China. This doesn't mean that I think they're a bad person or that they should be flamed. And this is not meant to be flame. This is just meant to be my opinions on players. I think it's just a necessity out of being a professional player. You're going to be compared to other people. It's just how it is. So an S player is a player who is good enough to warp a draft specifically, or a league-wide meta, or a worldwide meta, which China, more so than other places, can have that sort of impact where the best teams in the LPL will influence other teams, and their players make a big part of that. These players can compete on an international stage and can be difference makers at that level. An A player is the top of the league, maybe meta dependent, has well documented history and performances, and is a known quantity. And then we have B. B can compete with A level players, but is more prone to large mistakes, may have S or A tier talent, but not confident that they will reach it. C is a league average player, meta and draft dependent, will not reach S or A tier. So this is probably the tier that people have the most issue with, because I'll say that they're a C player, and like a C in other people's minds is like much more negative. But I can't do much about that. A lot of these players are just indistinguishable from one another, a lot of them are just indistinguishable from one another. Like, you can kind of split hairs and make rankings and adjustments and stuff like that. That's just how I look at it. D is a below average player but doesn't completely handicap their team. And then F is a bad player, hurts their team in general, and should probably be replaced. So let's start off in the top lane. And I've done some of the legwork beforehand. So first, how could I can't do A to Z. Actually, I guess I can. So first up are the S players. They're somewhat blocked out, or some of the information is blocked out. But we have Bin, Breathe, The Shy, and Zoom. Bin is 19, Breathe is 20, The Shy is 22, which I think would surprise a lot of people considering he won a world championship like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. And then Zoom is 24. Age doesn't have much to do with how good you are at the game, but it does kind of suggest, like, can they get better, can they get worse? Because at least throughout the history of League of Legends, once you kind of see the talent level that somebody has, you can fluctuate a little bit, but you're not going to go from an S tier player to an F player. So within this tier, I do think that Bin, Breathe, and The Shy are the 3 players that I hold in higher esteem. I know that Zoom is an extremely good player. A lot of people were saying that he was the best top laner in the world at one point. The one thing I will say about Zoom is that he is not the do-it-all top laner, and I have a preference for carry top laner, so maybe that's another reason why my opinion changes compared to others. But I think that the upside of having Bin, Breather, the Shy, being a carry player, being able to draft around them, play around them, is just a little bit preferential in my view to Zoom. And like I said, Zoom is an extremely good player, but he's more of like a tank player, go even player. And that's just a tendency. So if you view that differently than I do, then maybe that's just one of our big sticking points that we'll just have to have. Next up, we have the A tier, and I think that the only real players that are in the A tier are Flandre and Ale, and that has to do with World Championship performances. I think that some people might want to make the argument that Flandre is an S tier player. I just don't really think that it's true. I do think that Flandre is a very potentially good carry player at points, but if you told me that you needed to pick a top laner to carry one game, I would most likely go with Bin, Breathe, or the Shy. Like, I would just rather have them in my team than Flandre. Ale had a good performance at Worlds. I think that public opinion is going to be too high on him, which is one of the reasons why I have him as an A player, because I think people making tier lists will probably put him higher than players like the Shy, maybe higher than a player like Bin. But from what I've seen, I would rather have those other players. And again, this is where I find my differences compared to the public and the sportsbook. Then we have the B tier, and I only have two players in the B tier. I have 369 and Xiaolahu. So 369 I think gets way too much hate. A lot of the time I'll say it's tough to be a good player on a bad team because you don't get to show how good you are. And the reverse is also true. It's really difficult to be a good player on what's thought of as a very good team, because when your team underperforms, if you are like the fourth or fifth best player on your team, then you're going to get a disproportionate amount of the blame. And I think that 369 has gotten way too much blame for the problems that TES had last year. So I would expect 369 to rebound, and I think that's a good spot where there will be matchups that people are saying like there's not a big top gap, but in reality 369 could create that. And then in sixth place in the LPL we have Xiaolahu, and the reason I have them a little bit higher from everybody else is because when they replaced Nuguri at points last year, I think they did a really good job in the top lane. I think it was either a Vladimir game or a Jace game or both, where they were like dominant. And FPX has a good farm system where they've gotten a bunch of good players from their academy team. And then the rest of the top laners in this league are Rich, who I don't think that he has much upward mobility in terms of ranking. I think that he is an okay player, but at best I think he's going to be a B-level player. Nenny is the replacement for the Shy. Most likely not going to fill the Shy's shoes, and I just don't know much else about the player. Makuya is someone who's been around for a couple of seasons. We've seen a decent amount of film on them. I don't see them being much of a difference maker. They can win a game or help their team win a match, but they're like consistently against top tier talent, they're not going to perform at that level. So that makes them league average at best, in my opinion. Bew is kind of the same thing. Allies, same thing. ZDZ, I think ZDZ might be a player that has upward mobility. I'm not sure how much. Cube, I think we know enough about Cube that he's not going much up much. Same thing with New. And then we have Fearness. Fearness, I think, again, could kind of move upwards a little bit. I think we saw some okay matches out of Fearness last year. But I'm not sure if Fearness is even going to start. I'm using the rosters that Prodigy DFS put out, but I don't know if that's going to be accurate, because they still have Garvey. So it could be Garvey, it could be Fearness. I'm not sure who's going to start. Then that's about it. So let's go to the jungle. So in the jungle, let's go to Z to A. Yeah, that'll look better, I guess. So in the LPL, I think we have 4 junglers that have really distinguished themselves and are considered world-class junglers. So we have Tarzan, Karsa, Beishang, and Kanavi. I think that obviously last year Kanavi didn't have the best split, but I'm a believer that talent is kind of static, and you're either a very good player or you're not. And then you can move up and down a little bit based on form, but for the most part you either have that level of talent or you don't. So I still have Kanavi very high. Other people may have him lower. So then we have Tarzan. Tarzan had a pretty good year last year. Everybody was really excited when Tarzan went to the LPL because they had like that year off. And they're still one of the best junglers in the world. And it kind of plays into the fact that although Tarzan's 22, he's been one of the best junglers in the world since he became a professional jungler. And it's going to take some convincing to think of him as not one of the top junglers in the world. He's a little different stylistically from some of the new carry style junglers that are out there. Tarzan's more like Kanavi, and I do have a preference for that style. So I would probably say Tarzan is the best, and then I would say Kanavi's probably the second best. I think that Beishang's, and I do think that the upside of Beishang's a little bit higher than Karsa, but Beishang and Karsa are very similar, so you could even go like 3A, 3B. But they're all four very good players. I think in all these matchups that they're going into, or in all of the matches that they would be going into, they would be considered the favorite in that role and should be able to create an advantage. Like maybe they don't do it as consistently against A-level players, but they're the four junglers that I would look at first as players who I would want to build my team around or build a game plan around. Next up in the A tier, we have Jai, SFM, Beijuan, and Klid, because I'm not sure who's starting for them. And then we have Shun. So Jai, obviously, from the World Champions, he is definitely a world... He's able to play on a team that gets the World Championship. You're an A-level player. I don't think that Jai was the heart and soul of that team. I think that Viper should get most of the credit. I know that some people gave Scout a lot of credit, especially during the regular season. But without Viper, Scout is not able to play the way that they play. And the same thing with Jai. Like having that level of player in the bot lane just fundamentally changes how your team can play League of Legends and draft. So I think that we need to give a decent chunk of credit to them. That's another reason why I have SFM in the A tier, because last year or 2 years ago now, I guess, when they made it to the finals, Huanfeng really does a lot of the work for the team in terms of attracting attention, other teams drafting around, like playing against a player of Huanfeng's caliber. But SFM has a different impact on draft and the game because he's a very unique player in the sense that his champion pool is somewhat unique, his item builds are somewhat unique, and he forces a lot of stress on the draft that way, where the other team can never really know what SFM is going to feel like playing in a given matchup. And he has a couple of different styles that he can go to. Although he wasn't the best carry jungler. And in 2020, when they made the finals, it was a finals that probably shouldn't have, or it was a meta that probably shouldn't have fit SFM, but he is that level of player, and I'm very excited for their roster this year. Then we have Beijuan and Klid. Klid is a jungler that's more in the style of Tarzan and Kanavi, but they've been around for so long and they haven't been able to really make the most out of their potential on the teams that they've been on, because they've kind of been on teams that are thought of as underachievers. But I think that Klid is a very good player. It's interesting that Beijuan and Klid are on the same roster because they're very different players stylistically. So I'm not sure who's going to win the spot. It could be a situation where both get to play. So that'll be interesting. It might also come down to Klid and Gory both being Korean. I don't know if that's going to have an impact on who plays, like if there's some kind of language barrier. Then we have Shun. So I think Shun has done a really good job on Invictus Gaming. I think that Invictus had a lot of problems last year because of their bot lane. People will say it was also the Shy's fault. It's just when you have a very questionable bot lane, nobody needs to play around it, and then you can put additional resources topside. And then when the Shy needs to play aggressively because he's trying to create the winning difference for his team and he's getting more attention, then he's punished for being aggressive when he needs to be aggressive to give his team a chance to win. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, or a vicious cycle. One of those. It's one of those kinds of situations where you need to play a certain way and it's predictable and you're going to get punished and you have to do it anyways. Then in the B tier, we have Wei, and Tian. I think that Tian needs to be put at this level at the very least because of his talent level historically and being a very good jungler in the past. But there have been a lot of issues recently. Do I think he could be an A level player? Yes, but do I think he'll ever be an S level player again? Probably not. And then Wei and Wei, they're both okay junglers. I know that there were points last year where people were saying they were like elite junglers. I personally just don't see it. Like if you told me it was going to be S of M against Wei or Wei, I think that I wouldn't be like, oh, S of M is going to destroy them. But I also don't really think of them as the same level of player, and that's kind of the small distinction between A and B. Is just I also think that some of the players that I have in A that are question marks, that's where I think I have an advantage over the rest of people when I'm analyzing a matchup. So I expect people to have a different opinion than I do on those players specifically. Then we have Aki, Hacker, Xiaohao. I'm not sure. I don't know much about that player at all. Junjia, Frigid, and Shadow. So they're all league average players. Hacker could be a B level player. Like it's either a B or a C for Hacker. And this is again, it's like kind of just reiterating the point that in a league that is this competitive, you can be a good player relative to the other players in different regions, but you're going to be average because you're in a more difficult league, and that's just out of necessity. And I think there are levels to these types of players, so there will be some that you obviously disagree with me on, but I can't help that. So that's it for jungle. Let's go to the mid lane. In the mid lane has 5 very good. There are 5 very good mid laners. These are 5 of the best mid laners in the world: Scout, Xiaohu, Duanbi, Knight, and Rookie. So if I had to rank this, I would say that Knight is probably still the best out of these 5. I think that I would rather have Xiaohu than Scout, because I think last year you really saw Xiaohu's depth of game knowledge. I think that he was just on a bad team than what people kind of thought for a while, because RNG is such a household name and has such a huge fan base that they have such high expectations, and failing to live up to like world championship or bust expectations doesn't mean that you're a bad player. So I think I would take Xiaohu before Scout. Actually, and I think I would take Duanbi before Scout too. And then Rookie's in 5th, but I love Rookie. I would consider taking Rookie above Scout as well. But again, this isn't like, oh, you're the 5th best, meaning you're bad. It's like these are all very good players. It's really different. It's really difficult to differentiate between them. Then we have in the A tier, Fofo, Angel, and Diagao. I think that a lot of people like Fofo much more than I do, which is okay. But like I can't put him in the S tier. Angel, I always had somewhat of a problem with Angel because I thought he was holding Suning back a little bit, but then he played really well at the World Championship that helped him get to the finals. So I would say Angel's probably the best out of these 3. Then maybe Fofo and maybe Yagao afterwards. I think that Yagao is another player that in 2020, when a lot of people were watching League of Legends for the first time because of betting reasons, they all thought Yagao was like a beast because his team was winning a lot of games and he would have good score lines, but he wasn't creating a lot of those advantages. With that being said, he can be a good player on a good team, if not great team. So you have to give him some credit there. In the B tier, we have Gory, Kryon, and Captain. I think that Captain is one of the most highly touted players to come out of IG in the past couple of years, so you kind of have to give him the credit of being a little bit better than league average, but we'll see how that ends up playing out. Kryon was given too much credit, so people were saying he was like an S tier player when he really wasn't. But I think that he is better than league average, so I'm willing to put him in the B tier. He reminds me a lot of Niski and Humanoid in the sense that he has some champions that he plays very well, but if you kind of force him off of those champions, he's going to be kind of a liability. Then we have Gory, and Gory at this point has gotten some minutes for some good teams, but isn't like a consistent starter really. So this will be a good chance for them to kind of prove that they deserve to be a starting mid laner in the LPL. So I like the potential upside there, because it's either going to go very good or very bad. He's not going to be thought of as a league average player at the end of the split. People are either going to say, "Oh wow, Gory's so much better than we thought," or wow, Gory is not a good enough mid laner to replace Doinb. And a part of that is unfair expectations, but that's the narrative I expect. Then we have XZZ, Kryon, Shanks, Harder, Forge, and Jay. And a lot of these players I either don't know much about or we've seen a lot from them and is not very impressive. Kryon is actually I think Kryon should be higher. I think Kryon is probably a B. Because he had a lot of good performances last year, the more that I remember. So I'm fine with that. And I think Kryon could even be higher, but I want to see it again from Kryon. So that's interesting. I'll have to remember that when I think about the teams in the next section. Now let's go to AD carry. And AD carry, I know people are going to disagree with me on this. So in the S tier, we have Viper, Huanfeng, Jackie Love, and Elk. Viper is probably the best AD carry in the world. Huanfeng, in my opinion, is probably a top 3 AD carry in the world. I think it's Viper, Ruler, and Huanfeng are the 3 best, and I think it's due to stylistic things about their team, the fact that they'll go to extremely hard carry style champions, and there's just a qualitative difference between a performance from Huanfeng and Viper compared to somebody like Jackie Love, where Jackie Love does have extremely high highs and has that playmaking upside that I absolutely love, but some of the mistakes are just too much. And it is due to aggressive play, so I don't want to fault him too much, but I do think that they are just better. Like, I would rather have Viper or Huanfeng on my team than Jackie Love. There's no other way to say it in my mind. Like, I think that a lot of people watching this video are probably like, no, Jackie Love is the best. You're wrong. And that's fine. You can have that opinion. It's just when Jackie Love plays Huanfeng and Viper, I'm most likely going to be on the Viper and Huanfeng side because I know everyone else is going to be on the Jackie Love side, and the sportsbook does too. So I kind of have it like that. And then I think Elk is a player that has the tremendous upside. He reminds me more of like the Viper Huanfeng Ruler style than the Jackie Love style. So he's like the best player in that style who is not Viper or Huanfeng right now in China. And that's a big benefit to have in your team. Then in the A tier, we have Gala, Doggo, Light, LWX, and iBoy. So Gala, I think is one of the most overrated players in the world, and I have to say this like every time I make an LPL video, because people were trying to make him sound like he was the best AD carry in the world at one point last season, which was just hilarious. Like it wasn't even close to being true. It was like a storyline they were really trying to push. But in my mind, he's kind of a Kai'Sa one trick. Still a very good player. And when I say one trick, it's like being a one trick for a professional means that you play like an S level Kai'Sa, and then everything else is like an A tier, B tier, where you just don't have the same impact on the game. And I genuinely do think that about Gala. Then we have Doggo. Doggo is somebody that a lot of people are very excited about because he has big carry potential and he also plays the Viper, Ruler, Huanfeng style, where you can think of him as a true AD carry, plays a ton of Aphelios, and that's one thing that I think is just like a stylistic preference for me. I like those kinds of players because it's much more mechanically demanding, and if you can do that, then you can play the utility stuff if your team or the meta calls for it. Then we have Light. Light had a really good year last year. I think a lot of that should be contributed to Tarzan's impact on the game. But LNG is going to be good this year, and they're going to look good. So I'm fine with leaving Light in the A tier. LWX, obviously, former world champion, was a big part of that team. Yes, you had Doinb, so it's tough to give LWX too much credit. But he is an A-level player, and we've already seen, I think, at different points this year and last year when they were struggling a lot, LWX was able to kind of keep it together and perform at a high level for a team that was struggling, especially at Worlds. And then we have iBoy. This is more of like a reputation kind of thing. iBoy has been thought of as one of the most promising AD carries in the LPL for a few years now. Whether or not it ever comes to fruition, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that it would be wrong to not put him in the A tier. And then we have everybody else. So all the rest of the players are C. see. Actually, I guess I should do the rankings. So if I was going for the 5th best AD carry in the league, I would say it's probably Gala, but I think Gala and Doggo are the two that I'd be looking at, and I think Doggo has more upward mobility than Gala. Then we have I'd be fine giving the Respect 7 to LWX, then Light at 8 and iBoy at 9. And again, it's kind of splitting hairs at this point. I think the important thing to take away from this is that there are the 4 very good AD carries. Then there's maybe Doggo, maybe Gala, but probably not. Doggo is much more likely to end this season or this year as an S tier AD carry. I think that should be not very controversial. Although they were playing in a league that wasn't as good, but even in the international stage, Doggo had a lot of really good performances. Then we have Fodic, Xiao Yuji, Abel, Stay, Betty, Puff, Eric, and LPC. And a lot of these players we've either seen for a few years and it's just not impressive, or I don't know who they are. So if you're looking for a player to come out of nowhere, maybe it's one of these guys. And then, last but not least, we have support, and I only broke support down into A and B because there are a lot of good supports in the LPL that do the job. But it's like I've said in the past, it's really tough to distinguish good supports from great supports from bad supports because so much of it is just dependent on their team winning or losing. So in the A tier, which is basically the top half, it's Mako, Ming, Crisp, Lumao, Sword Art, Xiaoxi, and Missing. And then everybody else, it's Zhuo, PP God, Hong, Lucas, Cold, Kadaya, Chow Chow, Zora, Southwind, and Chance. And some of these players, I don't really want to talk about supports. I know it might seem silly kind of glossing over supports altogether, but I challenge anybody watching this video to give me an outlier where you can either say, no, you have that person wrong, they're extremely good, or no, that person's too high, they're extremely bad and should be like a C or a D or an F. I just can't be bothered, to be honest. So those are the player rankings for the LPL. Let's take a look at the betting odds for the LPL. So, and I'm going to rank these into the other rankings that we have, and then in the next video we'll probably do player rankings first, and then the video after that maybe team rankings. I'm not sure yet. We'll do in one of those orders. But for the global tier list, the tiers are S, which are world's contenders, A, which would be competitive internationally, B, domestic winners or international qualifiers, C, competitive domestically, D, mid-level domestic, or F, where they have no future. So we're going to go from the bottom to the top. I'm just going to throw it on this screen over here because I have the odds. And the reason why I want to do it like this is because I think that some of these are actually going to surprise you a decent amount. So first up, we have Thunder Talk. So Thunder Talk is going from Longxi and Xiao 7 to new. I don't think that this is a big upgrade or a big downgrade. Longxi was serviceable, but wasn't impressive really last year. They had some good performances, but just was kind of not deserving of a starting place in the LPL probably nowadays. In the jungle, we have Frigid. I don't know anything about Frigid. In mid lane, we have Captain. Captain is thought of as a very talented player, but Thunder Talk struggled with them last year because just not enough quality surrounding them. Then in the bot lane, we have Puff and Southwind. Going from Samdi to Puff is a side grade. Going from Pudding and Teen to Southwind is probably a side grade. So I don't think that there's any reason to bet on Thunder Talk to win the split. You'll be able to bet on them throughout the year in good spots, and if they do make some kind of run, we'll have more than enough time before they get to ridiculous odds. Like they'll be a good team. They'll be a good team to consider betting on at long odds throughout the year because they probably will surprise one or two teams. But I do expect them to kind of end in last. Because they have someone like Captain, I feel obligated to put them in the D tier. Do I think that they would beat a lot of North American teams, European teams, and even some Korean teams? Maybe. I think that... definitely, yes, they would beat a lot of NA teams and EU teams. I'm not so sure about the LCK teams, but I think that's a fair ranking for them at this point, and we'll move them up or down in the next video probably. Next up, we have LGD. Needed that. So, for LGD, we have Fearness and Garvey. I'm not sure who's starting. I would think Garvey will probably start, but Prodigy DFS had Fearness, so it might be him. Then we have Shadow in the jungle, and Shadow is somebody that I like because he went from getting kicked off a European team to starting in the LPL, and that's an upgrade in terms of league, in my opinion. And like, if Shadow went back to Europe, I'd be interested. I would be interested to see what the reception is, because I bet a lot of people wouldn't put much value in the starting in the LPL when they really should. In the mid lane, we have Ye and Jay. Those are both probably downgrades from Shie. I know that Shie didn't have a great year last year, and like the one chance they had to play for JDG, they like lost the match, and they weren't really given another opportunity. Can't really put too much stock in that, in my opinion. In the bot lane, they went from Kramer to Eric and Jinzhao. Kramer was sort of a liability last year, so I'm fine with this change. I don't think Eric is like a great player or anything like that, but I understand why you'd move on from Kramer. And then Mark is gone. Now they have Chance. So, or I'm not even sure who their starting support is going to be. I guess it's probably Chance. I'm not betting on them. I think these odds are about right. So that has them at a 1% chance to win. I'm fine with that. In terms of future, this might be an F team in terms of future. But I respect the LPL too much. So I'm going to go LGD. And then this stuff is going to have to start moving down. Next up is Anyone's Legend. Is their roster not on here? It is not. Okay. Oh, they have Maple? Okay, so I need to double check some of these rosters. So it'll be ZDZ. I don't know much about ZDZ. Xiaohao. Don't know much about Xiaohao. Don't know much about Harder. If it's Maple and Betty played on Flash Wolves together, I think. And then Kaishuan and Chow Chow. I think Chow Chow will probably start. I don't have any faith in this team. There's no. This is like a team that I would almost consider an F tier team, because while their performances might be better right now, they don't have the future upside, I think. Unless they go like ZDZ, Xiaohao, and then for some reason Harder's better than Maple, and then they use Betty and Kaishuan or something. Like maybe that's the way that they're going to approach it, but this might be a team that has no future. But again, I respect them too much. They're better than GG and FlyQuest, so I'll just put AL. That's fine. Then we have Invictus Gaming. Okay, so a couple of downgrades, and again, this is a team that doesn't have a legitimate chance of winning Spring, I think. So going from the Shy to Nenny is a downgrade. Jun is an okay jungler. I don't have any problems with that. XZZ and Yukai, don't know enough about them. An and Xiao Yuji, don't know enough about them. And then K or Key or Lucas, I don't know enough about them. So it's really difficult to put any money on Invictus Gaming to win this split. Like maybe we see something special in the first couple of weeks and then can get a futures bet in on them, but we're not going to do that before the season starts. So the fact that there are a lot of names that I don't know, I'm fine leaving them in the D tier because at least we can say maybe they have a future. Let's go to OMG. So we have Makuya and Shanji. Okay. I don't know anything about Shanji. Makuya versus New, I don't really care. Aki is an okay jungler. I'm pretty sure Aki is the guy with the crazy picture that makes me think that he's just completely insane in real life. Kryon had a lot of good performances last year. I think by the end of last year, we were betting on OMG to win matches in upsets because of Kryon and Abel. So I think Kryon, Abel, and Cold are good enough. This would be the kind of team that you might want to put them as being competitive domestically. So I would say we should put OMG here for now, and then highlight them because they might be the kind of team that you want to bet on before the season starts. Just thinking that Kryon might take the next step. Let's go next. Next up, we have Ultra Prime. Is ZS still on their team? Because ZS is another player from Invictus that people were high on. Yeah, I bet this guy. I think this guy will probably end up being the starter, and he's somebody who I think does have upside because I believe in Invictus Gaming's academy because they were very strong. So I wouldn't be surprised if ZS just takes over allies. In the jungle, we have Hacker. Hacker's good enough. Not an incredible player, but good enough. I think that Kryon is better than Irma and Xiao Kao Bao. Elk is better than SMLZ, and then Xiaoxi is a good player. So Ultra Prime's another one that I think you either have to put them in the D tier or the C tier because I think they could compete. Elk is that good. So if it's ZS, Hacker, Kryon, Elk, and Xiaoxi, I think that you have ZS, who is a potential carry top laner. You have Hacker, who is going to be a good enough jungler, not a great jungler. You have Kryon, who's going to be able to play for side lanes in like the Niski and humanoid role. Then you have Elk, who's a legitimate carry, like a very good carry, a legitimately, potentially very good carry. And then Xiaoxi. So this is a team that I definitely have to be higher on than everybody else. This could be like a Sunning spot where we were very high on Sunning early. So watch out for Ultra Prime. Next up, we have JDG. So going from Zoom to 369, I don't think it's that big of a downgrade. Kanavi's obviously still a very good jungler. Yagao is still a good mid laner. Hope might be the starter. Okay, so I don't know if it's going to be Hope or LPC, but Hope is okay. But notice the difference between somebody like Viper and Hope. When Hope was on EDG, they were like kind of struggling a little bit to compete internationally or even make it to Worlds. Then you get Viper and they win Worlds. So just keep that in mind. And then we have Missing. So I think that JDG should be competitive domestically. Whoops. That should give us some time. So JDG, LPL, they should be competitive domestically. I'm not sure if they have the upside to win, but they should be solid. Then we have Teamworld Elite. So going from Breathe to Beijuan is a downgrade. Going from Xie is on Teamworld Elite. That might actually be good. So going from Breathe to Beijuan is a downgrade. Beishang's still very good. I like Xie. I think that Xie will probably win the mid role. Going from Elk to Xing is probably a downgrade. I don't know enough about this player. Let's see where they're from. And then Missing to Kadaya, it's probably a downgrade. Okay, so this is an up-and-coming player theoretically, but I don't know enough about them to give them too much credit. I'd have to see it on stage to kind of believe in it. But I do like Beishang, Xie. I think that World Elite is not as good as JDG. That's tough. I think we have to put World Elite down here. I think that Breathe leaving is going to hurt, and Elk leaving is going to hurt, and missing. So I'll put them in D. But if Xing is good, then they could be higher. Next up is Rare Atom. So we have Cube, Leon, Junjia, and Xiaoyang. I'm not sure if Leon has left the team. I guess he's still there. So Leon and Junjia are going to have to fight for the starting role. That's fine. I don't know anything about Strive, really. Forge is an okay player, not a great player. iBoy is good enough. And then CJ is the new support. I don't know anything about CJ. So this is another team that I think that I'm fine with leaving them mid-level domestic. I think that's probably the highest that they're going to get. Then we have FPX. So going from Nuguri to Xiaolahu is probably a downgrade. I'm not sure how much of a downgrade. Going from Tian to Beijuan, well, they already had Beijuan, but going from Tian to Beijuan or Klid definitely being the starter, I think is maybe even an upgrade, but probably a side grade. Going from Duembi to Gori is a downgrade. LWX and Jiang are good enough, and the support being Hong. So I think that I like JDG more than FPX, probably. So we'll do that. I think I do like FPX more than World Elite, though. But FPX and World Elite are probably going to be very close in terms of the rankings. I do like FPX more than Rare Atom, though, for sure. So now we're starting to see a break kind of form. FPX, V5, and V5 is not on that list right there. So V5. So we have Invincible, Rich. I'm not sure about Rich. It stinks that XLB is not, Xiaolong Bao is not going to have a starting point, starting position. I do like them as a player. Karsa, Rookie, Photic, and PP God. I don't like Photic. I thought he was not good. He came in at some points, I think, for top esports last year, right? Yeah, top esports challenger. Yeah, they were okay, and they were one of the 80 carries that got replaced by Jackie Love. So you can't put too much stock into that, I guess. I like this roster. I'm not completely in love with this roster. I do think that Karsa and Rookie are both very good players. I do like PP God. I don't love Invincible or Rich, and I don't love Photic. So I think that they should probably be in the C tier. They're not. I don't think much differently. Like JDG, FPX, V5. I guess those should kind of be about the same. Like if you told me that they ended the season in the semifinals because Karsa and Rookie were able to get them there, like I wouldn't be surprised at all. If you told me that they won, then it means that Photic played much better than people expect. So I think that betting on them to win the split is based off of your opinion of Photic. And PP God was good, but not great last year. Like V5 made a run either last year or the year before, which is kind of impressive, but that's kind of the limit for them, I think. Next up, we have Weibo. So Weibo is Sunning, I think, right? Yeah, roster has joined a new organization. Yeah. So I already loved Suning. I think that Suning will be competitive this year. I think that they can definitely make worlds and compete internationally. So I think that we have to put Weibo in the A tier. The Shy is one of the best top laners. SFM is one of the best junglers. Well, the Shy is one of the best top laners. SFM is a good jungler. Angel is a good mid laner, and then Huanfeng and Sword Art they're probably a top 2 or 3 bot lane in the league. I'll have to check that again, but I kind of expect them to end up in that area. So that's Weibo. Very high on them. I think that they'll be competitive domestically and have chances to win, to make it to Worlds. Then we have BLG, so the Billy Boys. Going from Bubu to Breathe, big upgrade. Having Weiwei be your full-time starter is fine. Going from Zika to Fofo is, in my opinion, probably a downgrade. But I know a lot of people probably think it's an upgrade. Getting Uzi back into the professional scene will be interesting. I'm not sure if Uzi's going to be playing full-time. I know that Doggo has tremendous upside, so that'll be exciting to watch in the bot lane. But I don't think either of them is like that much better than Aiming. I think that Aiming is a very good AD carry and should have a bounce-back year. And then going from PP God to Crisp is fine. I think that getting Crisp, getting Breathe, basically bringing in these players specifically makes me feel like they are pushing to be competitive, but I think that the name recognition might have them a little bit overinflated. Like I would prefer Weibo over BLG. So I'm going to put BLG in the B tier, and this is the first team I'm putting in the B tier. I just want to see how it kind of looks when I get through the rest of these teams. Then we have EDG, so the world champions. They still have Flandre, still have Jai, still have Scout, still have Viper, still have Mako. I mean, they're obviously world's contenders, so we're going to throw them in the S tier. LNG. LNG. So we have Ale, it's fine. Tarzan's very good jungler, obviously. Going from Icon to Doumbé is an upgrade. And then we have Elwandi and Lumao. I'm not sure which one's going to start, but they're both good players. I think they'll definitely make it. They definitely will be competitive because there's a realistic chance of them making it back to Worlds. This is another roster that I probably like more than BLG. So I'll put them in the A tier. Next up is Top Esports. Okay. So going from 369 to Zoom is probably a slight upgrade. Going from Karsa to Xiaopeng or Tian is probably a downgrade. Knight is still one of the best mid laners in the world. Jackie Love is a very good AD carry. And then Zhuo, this is going to be kind of a make it or break it year for them because there's a lot of expectations for this Top Esports team. So it'll be interesting to see how they play going from Karsa to Tian or Xiaopeng. That'll be pretty cool because Karsa has been such a talisman for this team, and I know that that's a big part of what people expect. So I would say throw them in the A tier. And again, this is going to change in the team ranking video, the global team ranking video. But let's leave it there. And then we have RNG at plus 350. So going from Xiaohu to Bin in that role specifically is probably a side grade. Bin's just an incredibly good player in my opinion. Then we have Wei. Wei is a good jungler. Played fine at Worlds. Xiaohu, one of the best mid laners still, I would assume. And they can flex. It'd be really cool if Bin ended up being able to flex into mid and they kind of play every draft looking to create an advantage somewhere. And then Gala is a good, not great AD carry for the region. And then Ming and Bunny are both very good. But I think we're fine putting RNG in the A tier. So I'm going to have to go back. And look at these teams again in a separate video to differentiate. Like, I obviously think that a lot of these teams in the A tier from the LPL are better than like EG or Vitality. It's just that EG and Vitality are more likely to make Worlds than some of those teams because of the number of slots given to each region. So I'll have to think about how I want to grade it out and rank it out in that video. But this is good. I think that this is a good starting point. This is a good starting point. In terms of teams that I would consider betting on, it's I need more time to think about these teams. That's the problem with the LPLs. There's so many more teams. Like, I know it's getting to be like a long video, so let's leave it at that. I'll do some more futures consideration in a separate video. So the next videos to expect are a global power rankings video for teams, a global power rankings video for players, and then I'm thinking about doing like individual team videos and individual player videos, but we'll see how much time I have for that over the weekend. So that's all you're getting from me today. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later.